Welcome to Superlatives, the show where comics go head to head. Every episode, we pick a superlative theme. This week, it's best comic book crossover issue between different companies. Two of our editors each nominate a comic they think deserves the title, then step into the ring to make their case. When the arguments are done, our moderator, which is me this week, delivers the final verdict, deciding which comic walks away with this episode's superlative. My name's Dave Wielgosz. I'm a comic book writer and a contract editor here at IDW. I'm also the first person to lose this show twice. Can I lose as the moderator? Today we're going to find out. Here are the editors competing against each other today and the books they'll be representing.
Hey, I'm Jake Williams. I'm an editor at IDW Comics. I'm also the reason Dave's a contract editor because of the way he treated me. He's now on probation. Today I'm representing the battle of the century. Superman versus the amazing Spider-Man. It's the greatest superhero team up of all time.
Hi, I'm Nic Nino. I'm also an editor at IDW, and I am also the reason that Jake found the courage to speak up against Dave Wielgosz. Today, I will be representing Robocop versus Terminator, which is issue 2. The greatest crossover of all time.
No, mine says that on the cover. Yours isn't. That's not part of the title.
Fellas,
mine is implicit.
We're gonna get there.
Wow. Wow.
They didn't need to put it on mine. Everyone knew.
All right, the comic book crossover, a time-honored tradition. There are times in comics where we don't.
How are you doing?
At me?
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you guys today.
Yeah?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Wait,
Okay.
Dave, you went to Emerald City Comic Con.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. How was that?
It was kind of like a crossover. I went to a place I'm usually not, and I went to
Whoa.
a place where other people are. And they're like, whoa, Dave Wielgosz from LA.
Yeah,
I was like,
that's big.
This is crazy.
That is crazy.
So in a way, comic book events are like crossovers with creators.
Now, did you see other creators, and before you realized you were allies, did you get into some like misplaced battles?
Yeah, there's a section on the floor for fights next to Artist Alley.
I see.
And then there's a friend zone where you like have a coffee and catch up and go, what's going on? Do you also have like a complicated origin?
Where did you spend your time?
Artist Alley.
Artist Alley?
Yeah.
Not in friend zone or fight zone?
Nope. I was mostly in Artist Alley. People know me. I'm a known quantity. I've already had my fights in these industries.
Now, Dave, was there a person that you had heard of their name for a while that when you saw them, you maybe were like, I don't like your vibe, but by the end of the weekend, you were having a great time?
There was a couple people I'd never met before where by the end of the week, I was like, I like the cut of that guy's jib. I think we're going to be friends.
It's a positive thing. Name a name.
I'd never met Tony Fleeks before, the great Tony Fleeks, and we had dinner together, and we were on the same flight back, and he was a lovely, lovely man, on top of being one of the best and most celebrated people in our industry currently.
Wow.
We did not fight, though. I think he would have bested me.
Well, Nick, Tony versus Dave, who comes out on top?
Tony versus Dave. Now that's interesting. I've only met Tony the once, and it was very briefly. But he is a looming presence. He's much taller than me, at least.
He does. He has a couple inches on me as well. Yeah.
So I do think that counts for a lot.
Yeah, height's important. Height's important in a fight. That's the thing. All these power scalers, they rarely talk about height.
We're going to talk a lot about power scaling.
It's like the only thing that matters in
They're
the real life.
usually like
yeah.
assumed to be like similar heights. It seems like like Batman and Superman are always kind of the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Typically, I mean,
I kind of like when Batman's a little shorter.
Yeah.
I love that. You see that Pat Gleason cover? Remember that one?
Yes.
From
He's
the
a
reboot
lot
era?
shorter in that cover.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
one.
I should, yeah.
So again, today we're talking about comic book crossovers, a time-honored tradition in our industry. There are moments in
Nick and I are doing well.
Yeah, you guys are doing. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You guys aren't really a crossover. You're more of like an everyday team
Tony
up.
Fleeks was so mad at you when you guys met.
You're more of like a Batman and Robin, or like a Spiderman and the Human Torch. It's like something we get very often, but we still enjoy it.
Yeah. Nick and I are roommates, and we were roommates before we started working together at IDW. Yeah. So that's crazy. We met at a comic book store, and it wasn't that we started as enemies, but I didn't know his name for a long time. And then the first time that I remembered his name, we started talking about comic books.
That was cool. I didn't know his face for a long time. I would confuse him with someone else that works there sometimes.
Nick has severe facial blindness. That's why I had to grow the mustache. He couldn't separate me out.
Yeah. Well, now you have more of like a Los Feliz face.
Now I confuse him and Dave, even though Dave has a full beard.
Yeah, I was going to say, all three men on this podcast are wearing hats. Dave, only one of them is bald. Can you guess who?
This is the hat podcast. Can we change this to a topic of like
hat
the
cast.
biggest hats in comics?
Whoa, the biggest hats.
Who has the biggest hat?
Matt Hatter.
Matt Hatter. Yeah.
Matt Hatter.
Doesn't the
Easily.
Thinker have a hat or a helmet?
Probably not bigger than Mad Hatter.
I don't think it's bigger than Mad Hatter's. Mad Hatter's also like a shorter character, so his hat is even taller.
Well, I meant like
by
most
proportion.
biggest, like not so literally, just like most prominent, most
I
important.
still think it's Mad Hatter. I think Jake's right. I think he nailed it in one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were we talking about? Oh, how we met. So then we met. I'd say anyone who gets hired at IDW, I go through a team up relationship with, where like I hear they're getting hired. I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we bringing in someone like that? Well, what do we want from them here?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm just like, just let me do it. And they're like, no, we're bringing in Dave. And then I met him, and he knew about all the podcasts I like and all the alternative comedy things we like,
All the bands
that I liked.
Yeah.
So things were pretty good.
Yeah, that team up worked out.
It worked out.
And that's been a long-term success.
In the office, we have a desk far away in a different corner for Jake, where he can just kind of.
He looms large and watches over everybody. It's like a loft area.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem because like it's a solution to a problem of Jake always being confrontational with people when they walk in the office.
None of that's true at all. Stop joking around.
This is fantastic.
Can we be serious for a second?
We're about to get serious.
Jesus.
Again. Yes. Because as I said, there are times in this business where crossovers are in vogue and crossovers are out of vogue. Right now, crossovers are wildly in vogue. Marvel and DC are teaming up again for the first time in decades. Even at our company, IDW, we've done some pretty terrific crossovers lately, including TMNT Ninja Turtles, TMNT Batman. Crossovers are very fun.
You corporate shill.
I'm just talking about stuff. I personally go back and forth on how much I like crossovers. I think because they were out of vogue when I was coming up in comics in the mid 2000s. JLA Avengers had happened, and it felt like it slammed the door on the crossover for a long time. I was like, oh, we don't really need to do this. We don't need to talk about these. Now they're in vogue again, and I'm a little older. I'm less of a snob, and I'm like, this is just fun. We're having a good time. And I think these two books you guys have brought today represent the two different types of crossovers. Jake, in Superman, Spiderman, I think you have, two iconic comic book companies bring their two most iconic characters together in what was truly the event of a century.
It's Batman erasure.
And now we're gearing up for Batman's fine. He's gonna be fine, guys. And now we're about to have the second team up between those two characters. I think I have that right. Second and third in a couple weeks with the release of Superman, Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Superman, one from DC, one from Marvel, reuniting these characters once again. And Nick, your crossover is kind of a thing that at the time could only happen in comics, where you bring together two pop culture titans in what is like a budgetless environment in comics, where you can just do the most epic, cool thing that at the time you certainly couldn't do in a movie. I think that's now changed since we've had movies like Alien versus Predator and certainly other crossovers. But there was a long time in the 90s, especially from Dark Horse, where like these type of crossovers only happen in comics and really set a pop culture precedent. So I'm really excited to hear you guys both talk about them today.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on what you were saying about like going back and forth on crossovers, like to just talk about crossovers as a concept first. Like, I think crossovers are tough. I think they're tough.
Yeah.
I think that in general, when I hear about a crossover, I'm not like typically that excited. Like, it has to really feel right in a way. Yes. But it's not something that I don't know. It's something that's so uniquely comics. So there is something that I like about it there, but it just kind of feels like, you kind of know what's going to happen. They're going to meet each other. They're going to kind of tussle at first and then join forces to go after a greater enemy. And it's like, it's the type of thing where people are like, whoa, isn't it so awesome that X character is meeting X character? But it's like, you can just like daydream about that as well. You don't need someone else to always do your daydreaming for you.
100%. I mean, especially now that we live in the time of like, we've lived in a time of like fan fiction and like fan created art. You see a lot of kind of stuff online where people are like, if this happened, this would happen. And unfortunately now with like some tools we're not going to talk about, people are making crossovers in a way that's illegal, gross, and not cool. But
actually, the AI crossovers are so bad and so stupid that I actually think it kind of shines a light on why these crossovers are good and cool.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And again, like the thing that's awesome about both of these is I think, so in the 90s there was a lot of crossover between Marvel and DC, and there was a lot of good ones, but they were doing so many at that point that like, you didn't always get like super top tier talent on every single one. I'd say like on these two books, you get some pretty incredible people joining forces. And I think that's the thing that can also make a difference in the crossover. Like, well, who's doing it?
Yeah. So, to talk about Superman versus The Amazing Spider-Man, back then these crossovers, and these are both great examples, the creative teams are absurd for both of these. they made them feel momentous. It felt like a big deal, and the companies are treating it like a big deal. Like one thing you'll notice about this book as you get into the creative team is that the credited editors are the editor-in-chiefs of the companies.
Yes.
It is Carmine Infantino and Stan Lee as the credited editors. It's written by Jerry Conway, who is the first writer to take over The Amazing Spider-Man after Stan Lee passed the torch. He also, at the time, was working at DC. So he had just jumped ship. He was at DC Comics at this point. So he'd written The Amazing Spider-Man, jumped ship. He's the person that killed Gwen Stacy, jumped ship to be over at DC. He was an editor there working at the time, was also writing on some of their biggest properties. We then have Ross Andrew on art, which is one of the only people that at the time who had drawn both Spider-Man and Superman.
Yep.
Lettered by Dick Giordano. Inked by Dick Giordano. Lettered by Gasper Saladino. Colored by Jerry Serp. And it's just a team of all-stars, you have a sick thing at the start of this where both Stan Lee and Carmine kind of have a little write-up about how this came to be. And I think the biggest thing that I kind of learned coming into comics was like, oh, if you have a big property, it must be easy to get a big name to come like write on it for you. And oftentimes that doesn't seem to be the case. And almost every cool thing that happens in comics, whether it's like a new creative team or someone coming over to a book or leaving one company for another, is because of relationships. You find that out really early. It's like they're friends with each other. They networked in some way. Like they have some personal connection that brings so-and-so onto X book. And the reason the DC and Marvel crossover happened is because Stan Lee and Carmine used to be creative partners. Stan had written stuff that Carmine had drawn back in the day. So they found themselves as the head of these two companies and they're buds. So they just were like, oh, we should have these characters cross over at this point,
Yeah. This is also, I believe, I'm forgetting what year this is published, but this is, I believe, relatively close to the first Superman movie. And like, we're talking about a time where Superman is one of the biggest figures in American pop culture. And The Amazing Spider-Man is not too far behind in terms of like breaking out from just being in comics and becoming a like mass national figure.
Yeah.
And like seeing these two characters together again, like I know it sounds silly, but like they're both red and blue. They both work for news organizations. Like you just look at them together and you're like, yeah, man, I want to read that. Like on a chemical, like animal level, you're like, I want that. I want that.
Now at the time, had Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends come out yet? This is like 76.
No, that cartoon was in the 80s, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting then, because we're at a point where Superman had been around for like 30 plus years at this point.
Yes.
And Spidey was about, would it have been 10 years old? Like he's about at his 10-year anniversary at this point?
If that's 76, Spider-Man debuts in 62, so we're talking about 14 years. Yeah. Half the length.
Half the length, yeah. And you feel that when you're reading the comic a bit. Like it's very clear that Superman is the elder statesman and Spider-Man's the new kid on the block. But I think that's just such a cool thing that Marvel did in just about 15 years, was just like their stuff was big enough that they were crossing over with, with the face of superhero comics. Spider-Man had already in 76 reached that pedigree and was able to like go toe to toe with Superman, which is super cool. So getting into kind of the meat of this book. Mm-hmm. So obviously, part of the reason I picked this is just because it is kind of the first major intercompany crossover, right? It is DC and Marvel collaborating for the first time. We just hit the 50th anniversary of this book. And I think that's kind of what makes it such a big deal, like such a momentous occasion. As we talked about, like a crossover is only as big and as important as the companies make it feel, and they made it feel like a big deal. They released this massive oversized book. It's basically a graphic novel that released in one large issue. The art is like incredibly cinematic. It really feels like you're looking at a blockbuster as you're going through this. I mean, there's so many of these just beautiful splash pages that really make you feel like you're on the street watching Superman work. And then I'd say an interesting thing about this crossover, and something that book does as well, I think a lot of modern crossovers use like some sort of portal technology or interdimensional travel to bring the characters together. Yeah. Where I really love the trope of just like, oh, hey, Superman, we exist in the same world. Welcome to New York, buddy.
Just leave it be.
They just leave it be. Just have it be that he doesn't live in New York. That's why they haven't ran into each other, Why won't they run into each other again? Who cares?
Yeah.
But for this comic, they exist in the same Earth. And I think that's like a great way to do it. When Lex Luthor and Doc Ock run into each other later on, they just know of each other. Doc Ock knows who Lex is. Lex knows who Doc is. It just makes sense. It makes it... you don't have to spend all your time explaining what's happening and being like, I'm from a different world. This is crazy on your world. You can just have them meet as human beings, which is just way better for storytelling. So the one thing about this comic that I think maybe points off for a bit is it takes about half the book before Spider-Man and Superman actually interact. There's a lot of time before that. So we get like a pretty long chapter of Superman just kind of being Superman. And at the end of it, he finds out there's like news conference that's going to happen, and then Spider-Man just being Spider-Man, and at the end of it he finds out at the news conference it's going to happen, and then we cut to the villains that meet each other first, and finally we get the intro of Spider-Man and Superman.
And the book really relishes that too.
Yes.
It really loves the amount of time it's taking to get to the team up.
It almost feels like a test. Like, I mean, one thing that we know about from behind the scenes is like these guys were kind of testing each other about like how they were treating each other's character, and we know that they did a couple of these crossovers at the time. They also did Batman and the Incredible Hulk by Len Wein and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. But the king of the crossover that didn't happen for decades was JLA Avengers. And you can read about that online or in any edition of the book. Those guys were going back and forth going, no, you don't get this character. No, you don't get this character. They can't be doing this. They can't be doing that. So this first chapter is almost like the company's being like, yes, that is Superman. Yes, that is Spider-Man. Yeah. Now you can continue. It's almost like you have to like pass this like character test before you can let them meet each other.
Sure. And yeah, it is. I mean, it is a fun thing, kind of building suspense, tension. I don't know. It's just ramping up to like, come on, when are they going to meet? When are they going to meet? Yeah. Slowly building to it. I think a really fun thing in here is sometimes with characters or properties, like, you can imagine a world where Marvel didn't want Spider-Man to look weak, where instead they understand that, hey, Superman's power set is he's way stronger than Spider-Man. So, like, when Spider-Man finally does, like, when Superman gets, like, full strength back and Spidey hits him, it, like, hurts his hand, right? Like,
one of the greatest beats of the issue.
Yeah, which is just fantastic.
It's fun when these crossovers do that, when they just kind of recognize, like, no, Spider-Man would lose.
Yeah.
Or, like, even within the company, like, Superman would beat the snot out of Batman.
Yeah.
Like, so what else can we do?
But also, like, that is such a Spider-Man beat, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm not, like, Spider-Man's not always the strongest character in a comic book. Like, even in his own comic book, he might come up against the Rhino or the Juggernaut, and like you like that he is like the little engine that could. So of course, like him punching Superman in the face and Superman falling down is almost like completely out of character. People would be like, that's nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense to keep him as the underdog, which is a lot of fun.
Well, I like that he's cocky in it too. He really loves beating up Superman.
Yeah.
And he's really feeling that when it does happen. He's like, I've had a terrible day. People are bossing me around. I love that I can just whoop this guy around for a little.
Yeah.
Another really fun thing about this crossover is, Superman and Spider-Man, as you were saying, they have a lot of things in their lives that go hand in hand. Like the most obvious being that they are both newspapermen, you know? So they're at this newspaper conference. Their secret identities are actually what brings them together for the first time in this issue. And we get to see J. Jonah Jameson interact with a character that that I guess is Superman's boss at the time.
Morgan
that I'm
Edge.
Not familiar with. I haven't read a lot of that era of comics.
So in this era, this is actually like one point I'll be bringing up later. But yeah, his boss at the time was Morgan Edge, who had, I believe, bought the Daily Planet. And Clark Kent at this time is also a news anchor. He's a news anchor, which you're like, I mean, that might be a little challenging given the secret identity. Yeah. But also, like, at the time, like, that was their version of, like, modernizing the character, Where today it would be like, the Daily Bugle's like the Daily Planet is like a cool, like, Huffington Post-esque website or whatever, where at the time it was like, just put them on TV.
Yeah.
Even then, the newspaper thing felt antiquated, and it's like, well, that's crazy because I believe All the President's Men comes out this year around this time. It's like, no, man, newspapers are cool. Just let them work in a newspaper.
It's just a super fun issue. It's mostly monumental just because of what it is, but it's a really fun time. It's fun to watch Mary Jane, interact with Lois, and I think it's just fun. Just a fun book.
It's just fun. It's a beautifully colored book. Like, I love the way it pops over there. I loved these facsimiles that DC are doing
they're
or
blast.
whoever put that out. They're really fun. Like I loved just like it felt like a newspaper. It's newsprint.
Yeah.
But it felt like reading a newspaper. It felt like a little kid at the breakfast table.
Yes.
Dad's got his newspaper.
Yeah.
I've got my big copy of Superman, Spider-Man. Like every time I opened it.
Was this
crinkled.
originally released as Treasury Edition sized? Is that how
I
it
believe
came
so,
out?
yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, that's another thing. Like, just
Yeah.
understanding that it's that much of a moment that it comes out in that
Yeah.
massive oversized
I mean, imagine being
package.
like a kid in the car driving to vacation. You got this thing with
Yeah.
you. You're like, this is
Yeah.
the greatest day on earth. You
Yeah.
know. So one thing I will say is like we talked about the Superman Spider-Man scene where Spider-Man punches Superman, he gets his hand hurt. I do wish there had been a scene between Lex Luthor and Doc Ock where Lex Luthor was like, "Hey, can we talk about your haircut for a minute?" And Doc Ock was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Hey, man, it's rough. Like, I think you should consider shaving it off. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I think you'd be happy as a balder man. I think that would have offended Doc Ock, and they could have gotten to their own kind of huge fight. And I think that's a missed opportunity.
I like that. Speaking of that, this did remind me because they do these little like hero identification
Love
pages throughout,
these.
and we get to one that's the villain identification page, and it reminded me of a piece of Lex Luthor's lore where Superman causes him to an experiment
As
gone
boys.
wrong in his youth.
Yes.
While he's in Smallville, friends with Clark Kent, and an experiment gone wrong causes him to lose his hair, and that is the turning point to villainy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because in retrospect, I haven't read the issue, but I've seen the cover. I think a lot of us have seen the cover
Yeah.
of the issue where Lex loses his hair, and that is a key issue.
I've read the
It's
issue.
considered like a minor key. I haven't read it, but in retrospect, it just kind of feels like a funny thing that happened. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's funny they had to explain that. They could have just made him bald.
Just so we don't
But,
put like an editor caption on the bottom, I should say like I worked on the new history of the DC universe, so a lot of stuff about Lex's hair. I know every version of Lex losing his hair.
It's
What's
so
the
funny that it was
current-
important.
What's the current answer?
I think it is a version of it where like he does do an experiment that goes wrong that Clark could have prevented, but it's a little more mild, a little more
Had the
dramatic.
option to prevent.
Yeah,
That Lex
the way you're
knows he
saying
could've?
Clark, the way
Why
you're saying-
can't he just be bald? What's crazy about it? It's not a thing you
Because
need to explain.
if you lose your hair, the younger you lose your hair, I think the more spiteful you are about it. You know, like if you lose, like I lost my hair when I was in my early, like my late teens, early 20s, and I was like, you know, a
Yeah.
little spiteful. But if I had lost my hair when I was like 15 or 16, I would have been like, the world is gonna reckon with me. Like a couple years, it's the difference between a supervillain and like a humbled person. You know.
Yeah.
If this is a quick answer, how does Lex get hair? Because in the Death of Superman, Lex has like beautiful
That
flowing
beautiful
hair,
red
and
hair.
an
Oh, God,
Australian
that's
accent.
like a
I think
clone-
he's like pretending to be his own nephew or
He's
something.
pretending to be like his own nephew or his own son. It's like a clone thing. Those comics are really rad, but explaining it in retrospect is a little complicated. But yeah, he has like a crazy rug.
I mean, that's
of
a
hair.
fun option for men who are embarrassed to get hair transplant surgery.
Clone yourself?
Is you come back and, well, you don't clone yourself. You just come back and say,
Yeah.
I'm not Jake. I'm Jake's nephew.
Yeah.
Drake.
Yeah. Hello, I am Rex Luthor.
Hi, I'm Bronny Jr. No, that guy's on the team too.
But I mean, my closing statement here is
Yeah.
it's just that, there's not a ton to say about the book. It's
Yeah.
straightforward, but it's great. It's exactly what it should be. You get to see the characters interact. You get to
Yeah.
see all of the fun matchups of their lives interact. They save the day. They beat their villains. It's a fun time. It's nice that it's oversized. Superman, Spider-Man crossovers are back, baby. We love them. We love when characters cross over. We love when it's not really about growth or real storytelling.
Nope.
And it's just mashing things together.
I was wondering
we think
if
that's
they,
good.
if they would do something with growth because they're such different characters. Superman is, and that's how they play them. Obviously, that's how they have to play them. But Superman is so infallible in this story. He
Yeah.
never really gets caught in a trap. He never guesses anything wrong. He just kind of knows where to go to find Lex and knows how to beat him.
Yeah.
And you would have thought that maybe he'd get humbled at some point and Spider-Man gets to step up.
Yeah.
And Lex walks away having learned a lesson. But nothing of the sort ever happens like
No.
that. Like,
We just-
I think my biggest complaint about this book is once it gets going, it's very much a Superman versus Lex story. And
Yes.
Spider-Man is there for
Yeah.
personality, and Doc Ock
Doc
is
Ock's barely
not,
there,
he's
so-
just there.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And I also bring up a similar thing when we talk about RoboCop Terminator. But like one thing you really want out of a crossover is like, hey, are all of the essential elements of the characters intact? And I will say for the Superman Spider-Man crossover, I'd say 85 to 90% of what you'd want is in there. You get Clark Kent, you get Lois Lane, Peter Parker, Mary Jane, you see J. Jonah Jameson, you get Lex Luthor. But then the points where I'd be like, oh, that's a little weird is you brought up like Perry White's not their boss, it's Morgan Edge, and they're not newspaper people at the moment, they're newscasters. Like that's like a little bit of an, oh, right, that's kind of a change. And then in terms of villains, like Lex Luthor is Superman's greatest villain, but we talk about who's Spider-Man's greatest villain. I think Doc Ock is second place to Green Goblin, but you can't use Green Goblin because Green Goblin's dead.
Yeah.
So you get it's such there's such minor things to kind of grade down, but you're like, man, because Lex is such a tough character to compete with. It's like, oh, does Norman Osborn hold his own against Lex a little better than Doc Ock does? I'd be inclined to say yes, but like you can't retcon for a crossover.
That's such an interesting way that they were thinking about continuity at the time, because they're like, Spider-Man and Superman are in the same world, even though they never have been, and they ostensibly almost never will be again.
Yes.
But also, this world needs to look as it does now.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, you can't fudge too much stuff.
Yeah, like they could have just brought back Perry. They could have just said, here's the Green Goblin.
I think people have kind of gotten used to that now, where if you pick up a crossover comic, I think the assumption is that you're seeing an evergreen version of the characters.
Yeah.
Like kind of a generalized status quo.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of beauty of like JLA Avengers is through kind of more of the kind of metafiction plot machinations that you're talking about. Like they get to everything.
Yeah.
You leave going like, you saw every version of each team, every villain, every possible thing you could want. But again, they did a lot of crazy, intense, and really well done comic book plotting stuff to make that happen.
I did a reread of that, just in case we touched on it, and it was like a ton of fun. It felt the story lived up to, I suppose, the magnitude of the story lived up to the weight of what it represented of this crossover.
Yeah. Undeniably.
Like it was crazy. It felt like a capital C crisis.
Yes.
To kind of tee up Robocop v Terminator a little bit, I think that this crossover, at the end of the day, as cool as it is and as big of a deal as it was at the time, it does feel like action figures, right?
Yeah.
You're just playing with action figures a bit. It's just kind of like, let's see these big poster-esque moments of these characters interacting. Whereas I think Robocop v Terminator, what's really cool and special about that book is it takes elements from both of these franchises or movies or stories, and it crafts a new version of that story that kind of says something interesting. Like they use it to like make art.
Funny thing, this is technically an intercompany crossover episode, but these are the same publisher.
Yeah.
This is a very much, what we've gotten to do, what Jake and I have gotten to do with TMNT Godzilla. We aren't really dealing with publishers butting heads in the same way that you might have with DC and Marvel. But it's, like Jake said, it's a really fun story that kind of retells the mythology of both franchises. We open up in the far future. There's, Terminator stuff going on. It is a wasteland. And they send a human back to the present because, as we find out, Alex Murphy, what's his name, right?
Alex Murphy, yeah.
Alex Murphy, I don't know why I blanked on that. Was responsible. It was kind of the impetus for Skynet gaining consciousness. At some point in our timeline, he connects to Skynet, it becomes something else and, takes over the world. And so they go back not to save John Connor, but to kill Robocop. And from there, we meet Robocop doing Robocop things. He stops the person who came back for him, but the Terminator is also sent back a Terminator, who, is blown up. They win. What's fun about this book is they go back and forth a lot. The Terminators get like multiple chances to send back bad guys. Like it just kind of keeps happening.
When you talk about no budget, like it's like send as many Terminators as you got.
They just keep throwing Terminators into the past. Eventually, Robocop and this person who came back in time, they become friends. He's tempted by Skynet, refuses the temptation, is taken anyway against his will, plugged into Skynet. The future happens as we see it. Terminators win, but Robocop, sliver of his human consciousness, of his Alex Murphy consciousness, was saved in Skynet's programming, and for years and years was floating around takes over a little, creates a factory of Robocops and helps the humans win. Then everyone's happy. The future's fixed in a way that it never is in any Terminator film.
It's just like a beautiful utopia. They just save the day.
It is awesome. Like Frank just ending the story. I'm pulling up this utopia for the viewers watching the video because it is so funny. Our main character wakes up in a beautiful field. Wearing like future utopian garments. She looks like she's in like Atlantis before the city sank.
Yeah. Robocop is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Same here.
When I first moved to LA, the first time I ever went to Amoeba Records, I bought the Criterion edition of Robocop because I'm such a huge fan. So getting to reread this crossover was a delight. And like reading it today with all my comic book history knowledge, like Frank Miller and Walt Simonson, two of the best cartoonists of their generations, teaming up to do this comic. It's unreal, dude. It's unreal.
And the way that Simonson approaches the page is so much fun, and it's such a contrast,
incredible
to the bombastic, like IMAX images in Superman, Spiderman.
Yeah,
whereas he was cramming the page with action.
He there's some pages he really nails quite tremendously that are like kind of burned in my head now. And something about this book that I think is also fun is like Robocop is a character who is created because of comic books. Like the screenwriter of the original Robocop film, whose name escapes me at the moment, I believe his name is Ed Neumeyer. He was inspired by like what he called the anxiety-ridden superheroes of the 80s, like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Frank Miller's Daredevil, some of the like darker, more alcoholic-driven Iron Man stories. He was like, oh, like if we're gonna make like a modern-day superhero, he has to be like kind of anxious and sad, and then he creates RoboCop. And it's like, you know, because we get direct superhero movies today, like sometimes I am like, wow, what if people got to make movies that were inspired by comics instead of directly adapting them? Like that's how we got RoboCop. And similarly, like, you know, famously Jim Cameron loved Spider-Man. He almost made Spider-Man with Leonardo DiCaprio for I believe Canon films, but it didn't happen. But he creates Terminator, one of the all-time great pop culture characters. And I have to imagine some like cool sci-fi comics of his youth found his way into Terminator. So while these are both movie icons, they certainly have the feeling of comic book characters in certain ways. And it's not crazy to see them in this format.
And the world feels so comic booky too. Yes. I mean, both of them really, but RoboCop more so because it's so much more similar to ours. But the people are crazy. In the first scene, when our hero, do you remember her name? I'm totally blanking on it.
Flo?
Thank you. When Flo comes back to the present, she shows up in the middle of a busy intersection, and a cab driver gets mad at her and pulls out a gun, and then everyone walking around is like, oh, there's a fight going on, and they all pull out guns.
That's the most RoboCop bit in the whole thing. In terms of like satire and funny, and I will say like, I wish this book had more of those moments, more of that humor.
That was really that was an awesome part of it. I think what's so great about that crossover is it like really attacks like the conflicting essences of the books, right? It is one is a world where robots and humans are fighting each other, and the other is a protagonist that is half human, half robot. It is a brilliant thing to mix together. It's not just for the point of like, look at these characters meeting. It is an interesting story to watch and read through as this man reckons with the robotic and the human side of him, right? And it feels so like prescient with just the ideas of like how much we're giving way to robots each and every day, whether it's the phones in our pocket or AI. And looking at this future of what that creates, this Terminator apocalypse, and him being like, well, I need to kill myself to stop this. This cannot go on this way. This cannot continue that way. And I think it's a fun thing, too, because it kind of feels similar now that we're in this robot apocalypse. I feel like at least like I'm re-examining any sort of android character in any property that's a fiction. It's like, yeah, we should kill that guy, I guess. C-3PO should be murdered.
To continue the aside, though, it's funny to me that we continue to make these AI stories and the AI is the good guy. I think that's really fascinating. It's like, at what point, if ever, will that take a turn as just AI in the court of public opinion is such a controversial topic.
So one thing, because this is technically a media tie-in, one thing though that does feel kind of apparent about the comic is like the things they could not include. Like it is called Terminator, but like none of the Terminators look like our former governor, you know? Also, like, in terms of RoboCop characters, like, RoboCop, like, there's so many great side characters and supporting characters. None of those people are present in the comic, you know? Where, like, unlike Superman and Spider-Man, where it's like, we don't have to pay actors like this. We can just bring in whoever we want. Like, RoboCop is clear, like, you can use this person's likeness and nobody else's likeness. So while the scope is, like, intense and you get a ton of Terminator robots, like, you get more than you would in the movie. You're missing a couple elements from the movies that I really, like, dig. And similarly, like, you know, there's no Sarah Connor, no John Connor in this book, correct?
That's correct. If I may, I think that's a strength of the project. I think if Frank had to find a way to cram in Sarah and John, and Kyle even somehow, I think what works about this is it is the RoboCop franchise interacting with the concept of the Terminator franchise. Like, they get to reduce the Terminator down to a premise. And for the most part, RoboCop as well. They show his wife being sad that he's dead, and they show, you know, him going to sleep at the office and it being maintained. But for the most part, for the most part, it's just RoboCop on the job, and we never really see even his partner from the movie.
I think you're kind of I think I fall somewhere in the middle of you guys here, where, like, I think that is why this comic does work so well. Imagining a world where we have to make more room for, like, a John Connor type feels a little bit tough, but it also is why this just feels like a RoboCop comic, right? Like, it's very much a RoboCop
very
comic.
robocentric.
So if you brought in John Connor, if you brought in Arnold, you know, then it would actually feel like these two movies meeting each other. 100%. It does not feel that way. There is no real Terminator without Arnold. It just isn't.
It's fun because you know, it is. I guess a recap for anyone who doesn't know RoboCop. RoboCop the movie. Alex Murphy is a cop who's murdered very grotesquely at the beginning. It's hilarious. It's awesome. You gotta check it out.
In the best possible way. It's sick.
Yeah, Raina, you have to check it out. And they take him and they turn him into a robot. They're like, here's this dead cop. Maybe we can make him a robot cop. And they do it. And it works out really well. And he's really good at his job.
And to Jake's point, they try to suppress his memories so he only remembers being RoboCop, but, like, his humanity wins through. And in the second issue of this crossover, Frank and Walt visualize it in a really beautiful way where, like, he goes into his mind and, like, you see him as Alex Murphy, like, flying through this techno landscape. And again, like, that's something that works really wonderful in comics, that, like, and it's very beautiful and very poetic, that, like, maybe at the time in the late 80s, early 90s would not have looked as good in a movie. You would have been like, this is weird. This is a weird thing I'm watching right now. But, like, in comics, it works brilliantly, again, because they're taking inspiration from those 80s anxiety-ridden comics with those kind of dreamscapes that, like, RoboCop owes so much of his origin to. I pitched a scene for Jake, so I'm going to pitch a scene for this. One thing I would have really loved, I know it could have happened, but one of the best things about the first RoboCop is the villain, played by Kurtwood Smith, the dad from That 70s Show. He plays Clarence Boddicker, one of the greatest movie villains of all time. And, like, I would have loved if they could have brought him back. And at first you're like, oh man, he's back from the dead, and you're like, no, he's a Terminator. And you see his skin peeling off, and you just let him quote all his crazy lines from the first movie. Like, I probably shouldn't say his lines.
Line.
I know it's completely out of vogue, which is okay because I respect people. But, like, that would have been cool. You know, again, all these things in retrospect. But, like, I, as a huge RoboCop fan, like, I had such a great time reading this crossover. And again, to talk about the art, like, man, Walt Simonson, one of the greatest cartoonists alive, one of the greatest cartoonists of that era, and just, like, I think about all the beautiful organic things he drew in, like, Thor and how beautiful that stuff is, and to draw, like, mechanical stuff just as beautifully and it doesn't feel lifeless is amazing. Like, one thing I often have problems with in, like, you know, comics, a lot of machines or certain Iron Man comics is, like, it becomes literally like two action figures just running against each other and it has no life. There's so much, like, life and energy and dynamism between the RoboCop and Terminator fights that I think today it would just look like a bunch of, like, lens flare and, like, metal, like, hitting each other, where, like, in this it looks spectacular. And the colors do shift halfway through the miniseries. I do prefer the colors in the first two issues, the second two issues. No offense to the colorists of issues 3 and 4, but those first two issues in particular, I think some of the most beautiful work Walt's ever done.
Going back to the posing, I think there's some of these splashes, and this is a bad example because it's not a splash, but this panel here where RoboCop is, like, flying, and Walt is allowing him more, like, mobility. than he would have had in the film.
It's very
just looking
Kirby.
at the way his knee bends, that's the thing that makes it work. Like that's the bit almost.
Something we rarely talk about on the show also is, I will say, your comic and your comic, each lettered by two of the greatest letters in the history of comics. Gaspar Saladino basically set the template for modern lettering, and then John Workman, who I believe letters everything Walt does, just like, most letterers are kind of, they would say they're very inspired by both of those guys. So we often talk about art and colors and writing on the show, but I want to say we see lettering too. We see you guys and we respect you. And those two guys rule. And both these comics look terrific from top to bottom production wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you guys have any closing arguments before I start loudly thinking about which one I want to pick?
Well, this being an episode about intercompany crossovers, I did reach out to another company just to, in the spirit of the thing. So I have something I'd like to read. This is from Jamie S. Rich, publisher at Ignition Press.
Editor-in-chief of Ignition Press.
Former Batman editor at DC Comics.
Yeah.
Former my boss at IDW.
He's worked at Dark Horse. He helped found Oni Press. Jamie is like the crossover man of comics.
Wow.
Yeah.
The crossover man.
And I just gave him a promotion at Ignition just
Yes,
now.
you did.
So.
He also lettered a modern crossover people love, the Batman Elmer Fudd that DC did a couple years ago.
Did you say he lettered it?
He edited it. Excuse me.
Jamie.
Guys, I'm very sorry. It's late in the day.
That is one I considered. I've said this to you many times, Dave, but Lee Weeks is my favorite Batman artist of the 21st century. I think he's brilliant. I think that issue is brilliant.
But what did Jamie give us?
So Jamie, this is in Jamie's words. For me, the best crossovers take not just a genuine look at how the two characters who are meeting might interact, but find some kind of thematic common ground. The original Batman Grendel recognized the two sides of the same archetype of the overly accomplished and driven protagonist and pitted them against each other. Hunter Rose versus Batman was not the good-evil paradigm of Joker and Batman. It's really the same person making the opposite choice, to use their skills and resources for selfish, Hunter Rose, or selfless, Batman, reasons. Add on top of that, Matt Wagner bringing an uncompromising approach with his intricate storytelling, and you get a crossover with an artistic point of view rather than just something done for commercial gain. Arguably, he blew that up all that up with a sequel years later, flipping it into a blockbuster, this time Grendel Prime, who is more of a blunt instrument than a precise tool. If the first one was brains, Batman Grendel 2 was brawn, and the storytelling was more open and widescreen as a result, the colors too. You went from the more muted and meticulous Joe Matt coloring to the almost garish Gregory Wright coloring. Plus, Matt actually managed to make that crossover canon with the Grendel mythos rather than a side hustle by building to the story in his own comics for the year prior. Full disclosure, I was an assistant editor on the lead-in stories and the sequel itself, but my love of the original dates back to my fan days. The actual crossover I worked on that I'd call my favorite is Madman Superman Hullabaloo.
Oh, incredible
which is
crossover.
a blast.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have chosen it, but it is one that I regretfully forgot to review in preparing for this episode. Yeah. But I love that book so much. Much like Matt Wagner, Mike Allred brought his whole personality to the table and made a story that only he could make. And likewise, he sneakily made sure that when Madman came back to his own reality, he took a little piece of Superman with him. Yeah. For the more traditional superhero crossovers, though, the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans from 1982 is easily the GOAT in all caps, if for nothing else than the Walt Simonson and Terry Austin art.
That's the issue I probably would have picked if I was one of the competitors in this episode. You have two of the greatest team books of all time going on at the same time. They're both books about young adult characters. It was perfect. The timing was perfect. The books were perfect. The characters aligned amazingly. Walt also drew the heck out of that one. Chris Claremont is writing it. I do wish there had been a version that Marv Wolfman wrote, and maybe George would have drawn it. So we got two of them instead of one. But that crossover is really incredible. And in 2 minutes, Jamie Rich beat us in what we've been trying to do here for almost the last hour.
I know he put it very succinctly. I really like his comments about, because that is a fun thing about Madman, is forever after he's referencing like, this thing that I can do now after I interacted with that alien that we hung out with that one time.
There's also such a sweetness between Madman and Superman, and his great points about Batman and Grendel as well. They're such opposite sides of the same coin. And he gave us the okay to read that on the air. Okay, what a sweet man. Well, that definitely helps me inform what I was gonna say. But yeah, guys, closing thoughts, closing arguments.
Yeah, I think my closing argument is that I, as someone who's not a huge fan of crossovers, I haven't read a ton of them. I picked this mostly because of its standing in comics history, and I believe RoboCop versus Terminator to be the better crossover story. Is my closing argument.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just rolling over.
Nick?
I wouldn't call it rolling over.
Just telling me the water's fine, that I can hop in as well. RoboCop versus Terminator, I think it does something that, we've said this already, but it does something that the best crossovers do, which is to kind of negotiate these two mythos, see the ways in which they fit together best, and it tells a whole new story with them, gives us a beginning, middle, end that I think is a lot of fun. It's entirely removed from both franchises, largely the Terminator one. As much as I love Superman versus Spider-Man, I think when we got this facsimile and Jake and I were just gushing over the art, but I think it kind of stops there. I think one thing I'll say, in Jamie's write-up, he put it so well that Batman Grendel was not a commercial effort, and that was the strength of it. I think the strength of Superman Spider-Man is that it is a commercial effort.
Oh, yeah.
They've nailed so effectively the things that make these characters both so successful. Jake, as you mentioned, like the cover alone, both characters are doing what they do. That is such a Superman pose. That is such a Spider-Man pose. And that was what made it work. It was so authentic because of that. Because, essentially they're keeping these characters on brand. But ultimately, RoboCop versus Terminator, I think, is a more modern effort that is aged much better. It has Frank Miller at the height of his powers, just kind of doing what Frank Miller does.
Yeah.
And Walt Simonson at the height of his powers, I don't think he's ever really slowed down.
Yeah.
If you haven't read some of his most recent stuff, Ragnarok, I highly encourage you to do so. It's brilliant. But yeah, this is just two creators at the best of their abilities, telling a story in which RoboCop is tempted by his potential future, and it's cool. It's great.
This is tough. It's especially tough because Jake waved the white flag.
But that doesn't mean you have to.
That doesn't mean you have to. That doesn't mean your decision is... Is he going to make your decision for you?
Wow. I'm making your decision for you?
No.
He already picks what you eat for breakfast.
So here's what I'll say. And I think that you actually said it very astutely. I don't know that you meant it as like kind of a haymaker, but it really did change things for me, which is like RoboCop Terminator does feel more like a RoboCop comic than a Terminator comic.
Wow.
Where Superman and Spider-Man, while not as... I think in terms of what is the better comic book, yes, it's RoboCop versus Terminator. However, that's not the premise of the episode.
Wow.
The premise of the episode is what is the better intercompany crossover. And because of how much these guys had to like work to like give it 50-50, make sure each character was represented well, and kind of set the tone for every crossover that came after it, I have to give the belt to Superman the Amazing Spider-Man.
Wow. Dave, I think that... I think towards the end of this, I lost a lot of steam, and I think hearing those words, I think like I'm just constantly wrestling with what a crossover is and what the point of it is. And like, as someone who's worked on some crossovers that I really like, I think that Pharaoh Pei and Tim Seeley did an excellent job with Godzilla versus TMNT, which is a crossover comic that Nick and I worked on together. It's a fantastic book. It does the thing where it merges their mythos together in a fun way. It's also, we get these chances to like turn the turtles into kaiju, and we play with these little similarities of them all being mutants, and we have all this fun with it. But like at the end of the day, I think that growing up in like the post Watchmen world, the post Vertigo world, you have this desire of comics as literature, comics tell a story, comics have these like deeper meanings to them, and I think sometimes crossovers can have this bad rap of like oh, well, it's just silly. But also, that's an awesome thing for comics to be. Comics just being silly and just being fun and giving you something that other mediums don't give you.
Yeah.
I think it's important. So I think this crossover gave me a change of heart. I came out on top. I now realize I'm the protagonist of this issue. And the thing that and I think what I've come to learn is that there is value in having fun. There's value in playing with action figures. There's value in having an excellent writer and an excellent artist show you two comic book icons meeting up, you know?
I agree. And I think crossovers can be fun. One of my favorite comics I ever edited was a crossover, Batman Shadow by Steve Orlando, Scott Snyder, Ronnie
I don't know if we have
Roscoe,
time to keep talking about
Clem Robbins. But yeah, crossovers can be great. Crossovers can be fun. And like comics are allowed to be anything. They're allowed to be literature. They're allowed to be summer blockbusters. They're allowed to be some you read once and never read again. They're allowed to be something to change your life forever. And Jake, I've given you the victory, which has changed my life forever. Nick, I think you did a tremendous job, and I love the comic you brought, and I would read it again in a heartbeat.
You hate me, you think I'm scum.
No, I don't.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked hearing our thoughts on other comics, you should check out our comics, available at any local comic book store or online at idwpublishing.com.